Vote Linda Louise LaCasse on November 8th. State Rep. Why I, Tom Sherman, support Linda Louise LaCasse to be my state rep of District 52, Stafford and Somers, Connecticut. Linda Louise was born on November 29th, 1955. Linda Louise's integrity is measured by her strong moral compass that was cultivated at the tender age of 6 by the loss of her father in 1961. This is a photo of Linda Louise in 2nd grade, 2 months before her dad, at age 26, passed away from a car accident November 19th, 1962. Naturally, this experience began her destiny to be compassionate by nature to those who are hurt and have suffered. In April 1954, her mom, Lila Louise, married her dad, Lawrence. Louise lived at Fort Bragg, Fayetteville, North Carolina, where Linda Louise was born. This is a photo with her mom and her mom's 5 daughters on Soapstone Mountain in Somers. The girls were celebrating Linda Louise's 50th birthday on November 29th, 2005. Linda Louise LaCasse is the founder of a Victorian sentiment located at the LaCasse home on 87 Main Street, Route 190 in Somers. Here, the LaCasses raised their 4 children since 1990. Their home has been used by various charitable organizations throughout the years. The GFWC Earth Angels of Somers, founded in 2008 by Mrs. LaCasse, is a girls' club that meets at a Victorian sentiment regularly. Other organizations that meet at a Victorian sentiment include, but are not limited to, the Catholic Daughters of the Americas, the American Legion Auxiliary Unit 101 of Somers, and the GFWC Somers Women's Club. I have witnessed Linda Louise's ownership of cause and effect as she takes responsibility to deal with problems and finding solutions. One example is realized when she founded and created the Save the Somers, Connecticut Facebook site. Here one can view the 6 public hearings concerning the dangerous intersection of Route 83 and Route 190 in downtown Somers. This issue has galvanized over 2,000 signatures on a petition to have the town and state address this major concern. To date, 54 car accidents have been documented. 2 pedestrians have lost their lives. 1 pedestrian has been disabled for life. Our present leadership had not attended the public hearings. No selectmen and no state rep. A very glaring lack of concern from this present leadership. The proposed design of a roundabout at Somers Route 190 and Route 83 intersection, designed by our town engineer Jeff Board nearly a decade ago. This was submitted to the state in 2007 and 2013. This design would preserve the historic wood home and reduce traffic and congestion, and would result in a safer intersection. Here is a photo of Southfield Business Condominiums located on 48 South Road, Route 83. Linda Louise is the president of this condo association. Since her presidency, the property has had a new septic system and new roof. Prior to her leadership, the financial situation was dismal. During her leadership from 2013 to the present, expenses had been carefully handled. There's a significant rainy day fund that did not exist previously.
What your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. So when you look at the scheme of things, I'm a 60-year-old woman. I'll be 61 this November 29th. And you look at your life and you say, well, gee, what do I want to accomplish in 1 year? And what do I want to accomplish in 2 years? And what do I want to accomplish in 5 years? And for me, it became evident that my state being in the fragile condition that it is in, my town and my country could use some of the gifts that God has blessed me with. And so how long will something take remains to be seen. But if you do something well, and you do it methodically, and many hands make light work, so if you work together, things can happen. Does that answer your question?
It certainly does, and it, in a sense, really answers my next question already, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What is your approach, do you think, once you get yourself established as a state representative?
Well, Abe Lincoln said, you can fool all the people some of the time, but you can't fool all the people all the time. And right now, we're in a situation where our government leaders at the local level, the state level, and the national level have been incredibly disrespectful to we the people. And when Washington left office, he said that when we're in a crisis, if we the people want a quick fix, then we the people are going to depend on the government for making the provisions. And if that is the modus operandi, then the government will end up being worse than a monarchy. So at the end of the day, if we the people do not take responsibility individually in our own private lives, then we don't have the ability to lead by example. So your question was, what would be my approach? My approach is letting people know that I'm approachable. Number one, I live on Main Street.
No. I might mention you're very approachable.
Thank you. We have a circular driveway. We have a big sign on the front marquee that says, please sign our petition on the front porch. So the punchline is, when I become privileged to represent we the people from District 52, people know where I am. 1-800-US-LINDA. You cannot forget my phone number. You might not know what my cell phone is, but 1-800-US-LINDA, back in the day, 30 years ago, when I got this 800 line, I wanted my children to be able to reach me no matter where they were. And it was 1-800-87-LINDA. So the 87 represented the number of our home. We live on 87 Main Street. 12 years into our journey, someone called me and said, is this 1-800-US-LINDA? Well, the 8 was a U and the 7 was an S. And I said, yes. So all my marketing material became 1-800-US-LINDA. Now, US can stand for United States, it could stand for you and me, us, but how can you forget my phone number? So if I have a phone number where you don't have to even spend a dime to contact me, and my US Linda phone number goes right into my landline, goes right into my cell phone. So I am approachable by way of telephone. How marvelous is that? Obviously, to be approachable, people have to know where you live. I live in a town where our leadership does not want us to know where in town they live. Now, if you're representing people and you don't want them to know where you live, I consider that a problem. Because if my constituents don't know where I live, how can they approach me?
Yep.
And how can I know at a grassroots level what is troubling them? So number one, it's very critical to demonstrate respect to who you're representing. Does that make sense? Did I answer your question?
Yes,
Okay.
very much so. I was going to ask next, will people listen to you? However, I'm starting to realize they're going to listen to you whether they like it or not anyway, so we'll skip that one altogether.
No, I think that's an important question.
Alrighty, okay.
When I was learning how to speak back in the day, someone asked me, why are you in this course? And I said, because I want to learn how to listen. And women have a habit of talking. And part of the communication issues that we have from the bottom level all the way to the top is learning how to listen. And so if you don't listen to we the people, then you're not going to be able to understand how to execute. So in order to listen to people, you need to allow them to speak. And a lot of times you might not like what you're hearing, but that isn't, my goal is not to put a muzzle on people or to make them feel like their question isn't important or to make them feel valued. One of our gifts is hospitality. My husband and I, we entertain all the time. It could be one individual or many. And the most important thing when it comes to etiquette is making people feel comfortable. It doesn't matter that the fork is on the left side of the plate or the right side of the plate, or they reach for the wrong glass. Are you comfortable? And once people establish a comfort zone, they are given the freedom to speak and to really share what's on their minds. So, first and foremost, will people listen to me when I speak? There's this saying, I don't know who gets credit for it, people don't care what you know unless they know you care. So if people in my company don't have a belief that I care for them, I'm done before I get started.
Good point.
So,
Ultimately, what will be your greatest challenge in office?
well, since I'm running unaffiliated, I'm not bound by party politics. And the first thing that is going to need to be addressed is the budget. You can't take care of business if you're mishandling funds. So that would be one of the greatest challenges, is to help the folks that I'm working with understand that this is the first and foremost critical piece of our equation. So for example, the crumbling foundations. Right now in our region, we have maybe 300 homes that we know of. My girlfriend and her husband, Mr. and Mrs. Vecina, we're Catholic daughters together. She lives going down Pioneer Heights, so she's actually in the Ellington area. I believe it's called Reeves Road at that point. She's right on the border of Somers and Ellington. Her home was lifted up this summer 7 feet in the air because her foundation was one of the foundations that crumbled. Now, a lot of folks have said to me, why did she spend all that money? Why did she do that? Well, Mr. and Mrs. Vecina are responsible people. They think the way my husband and I think. They're not looking for a handout, but at the same time, they were victims of someone who gave a concrete license to a company. Now, who gave the company the license? The state gave the company the license. So the state, when they give a license to a company or to an individual to execute their job or their profession, the state now took ownership in that agreement. So from my vantage point, the state bears responsibility. But Mr. and Mrs. Vecina, they're in their 80s. They did not want, if they should die before they wake up, or not wake up, and their children are harnessed with this foundation that's crumbling. So the house isn't even worth, let's say the house is worth $200,000. Well, they had to spend $150,000 to get the foundation made over again. So when the foundation got made, it didn't improve the value of their home. It just sustained it so that it's still worth $200,000. If being in their 80s, they could have said, well, that's going to be my children's problem. Let them deal with it. And this is the cavalier attitude that's taking place at the local level, the state level, and the national level. We're not understanding that every move we make, every step we take, we are affecting our future generations. Mr. and Mrs. Vecina are my heroes. We had them here for dinner. All her beautiful perennials and plants, they got transplanted over here during this hot, muggy summer. Okay, so if the state has to bear responsibility, where's that money going to come from? The taxpayers, right? We the people have entrusted the state to license a company to put concrete in a foundation. All these homes, it could end up being thousands. The insurance companies don't want to take responsibility. So they really, it's like a three-legged stool. If one of the legs in the stool isn't working, the stool doesn't work, it collapses. So we have the homeowner, we have the state, and we have the insurance companies. We have three entities that have to collaborate right now. Now, I say the state, and when I say the state, that means the company that did the concrete job, well, they go out of business. So if they go out of business, where does the homeowner go? The homeowner can't sue a business that went out of business, correct? So the only thing the homeowner has is their homeowner's insurance and the state. Mr. and Mrs. Facina took their $150,000 out of their savings, rebuilt their concrete foundation. So number one, we can't fix concrete foundations that have been not made properly without money. So the first thing we need to do, the greatest challenge, is to collaborate with my colleagues and say, how are we going to fix this budget?
Well, you're certainly the one to meet the challenge that we just talked about, and that certainly is a great challenge. I think you're the perfect person for that, if you don't mind me saying so.
You might be a little biased.
A little bit biased. Let's talk about budget. What's your view on the budget?
Well, like I've said before, and I'll say it again, when it comes to the budget, if we do these quick little fixes, we're on the Titanic, we're rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic, and the ship's going down. So when the ship is going down, and we're rearranging the chairs on the Titanic, what sense does that make? So when it comes to the budget, one of the things that troubles me greatly is, I have an example right here, is the state's generosity toward retired employees seems to know no boundaries, okay? I've got this gentleman, congratulations, John Viga, V-E-I-G-A, a retired university professor from UConn, okay? He collected a total of $297,614.10 in 2015. Well, guess what? The way his pension is written, he will get a guaranteed 2.5% increase. So for 2016, what is Mr. Viga, UConn professor, going to get? He's going to get $306,000 for his pension. So number one, the state is promising pensions to people, and it's not going to be sustained. How can we have unfunded pension liability going on in the state right now. How are we going to keep the promises to our public workers, our teachers, our police department, our fire department, our correction officers, if we're mismanaging the funds? So I'm sure this Mr. Viga, he's not the only one in the state that's getting a 2.5% increase in his pension. I'm a private business owner. I can tell you right now, I'm not going to be retiring on that kind of a pension. That's not happening, okay? My husband, he put his life on the line. At the end of his retirement, I don't even think he'll get $1,000 a month. And he was on a battlefield protecting this country. So also, did you know that $249,000 for one apartment is considered affordable housing in Connecticut? The state approved a $78 million project to borrow 2016 to pay for new and improved affordable housing, including a $3 million grant to the foundation for Norfolk Living to build 12 rental units. This breaks down to $249,000 per unit. Wow. I just told you about Mrs. Facina and her little log cabin in Ellington. So this is the state's idea of affordable housing? Interesting. Then there's the issue with the unions. The union is defending an employee fired for smoking marijuana on the job. Gregory Linhoff, Linhoff. He was arrested in a state vehicle in 2012 while he was on the job at Yukon Health Center. He was a skilled maintenance man. Okay. Even so, the Connecticut State Employees Union Independent is fighting this arrest and has taken the issue all the way to the Connecticut Supreme Court. According to the arbitrator's report, Linhoff apparently told the officer he was just bleeping off, it begins with an F, this is a family show so I won't use the word, and smoking a little weed. Connecticut taxpayers paid him $90,807 in salary and fringe benefits in 2012. And he continues to make this salary, in spite of the fact he did something illegal at a health center, okay? And then I already brought this up at the debate we had on October 19th, that state employees, unbelievably, are on union leave at the taxpayer's expense. So the taxpayers are able to pay from our general fund right now. State employees in 2015 spent 121,000 hours doing union work. So they're getting their state salary and then they're doing union work, and this equals 4.12 million taxpayer dollars. So that's just 4 examples of our budget being horribly abused. And my opponent, who's the incumbent, he said he didn't realize until when he got into office that the budget was, they would do the appropriations, and then after the appropriations, then they would decide where is the money coming from. Well, that's not how I do my household budget. If all I have is $50,000 to work with, I guess that's all I have. So I have to work within the budget, not at the state level. They have these outrageous expenses, and then they say, well, how are we going to take care of this budget? For example, my girlfriend has worked with the probate court for over 30 years, and she was telling me that they had $3,000 left over, and her boss said, you better find a way to spend it. She said, but we don't need anything. He said, I don't care. Find a way to spend it, because next year we need that $3,000, and they'll cut us. They'll cut our budget, our line item, $3,000. So this has to stop. It's ridiculous. Nobody can keep this kind of budgetary idea going on forever and ever and ever and think that this house of cards isn't going to collapse. So those are just 4 examples of the indiscretions. So the bottom line is letting people know these indiscretions exist. And I know, Tom, that you and I are going to get to know each other very, very well, because if all you and I do is film once a week, once every 2 weeks, or once a month, and we take one subject at a time, we're going to educate the people, we the people, and then the people are going to take ownership of what happens at the State House. That's the only way this problem is going to be solved, in one woman's opinion.
We're going to be doing a lot of filming together, believe me.
And I'm looking forward to it.
Me too. Now, based on what we've talked about, we have quite an economic situation in Connecticut. Can you talk a little bit about the economic situation in Connecticut?
Well, yeah, I have the figures right here. Our relative financial position and competitiveness, state by state, Connecticut's number 50. Now, my opponent on the Democratic side during the debate, she shared at the debate that Connecticut was the second lowest in business taxes. And the truth is that Connecticut is 7th from the bottom, which means that there are 10 states that have the highest taxes in all of the country. The number 1 state is New Jersey. Then after New Jersey is New York. Then after New York is California. After California is Vermont. So go up the ranks, and Connecticut is the 7th of the 10 highest taxes for businesses. Now, I don't know about you all, but I know that when you have high taxes, and we're just a micro business. My husband, I have a home-based business. My husband has a small barber shop. Just for me to operate what I do, there's a license. My license used to be $100 a year. Now it's $250 a year. So before I even do anything, I'm spending to the state. Now they're saying, oh, it's a fee. So they're not even considering, this fees aren't considered taxes. But when all is said and done, every fee, every expense gets into the equation, and all of a sudden it interferes with the bottom line. So let's say, for example, my husband is selling a widget, and the widget, well, my opponent said this. This is a real story about helicopters in Connecticut, Sikorsky. The helicopter was going to cost $400 million to be made in Connecticut. $400 million more than what it would be made in Florida. Okay, so why would we have them build helicopters in Connecticut when the helicopter factory can go to Florida? We have Lego here in Enfield. My girlfriend worked there for over 30 years. She had to train her Mexican counterpart because the whole company went to Mexico. She had to train that counterpart her job, and she lost her job unless she wanted to move to Mexico. Okay, that's not going to happen. Then there's Hallmark in Enfield. My niece, her father, her husband, other friends worked in Hallmark. Well, they had to get out of town also. Summers, Conville, they're moving to Enfield. First and foremost because they need a bigger facility, and it's cheaper just to move to a facility that can accommodate them rather than build a facility that's big enough for them to operate. So all these ideas affect how we function economically. It's called competitiveness, the relative competitiveness. So for example, in Wyoming, Nevada, and South Dakota, they have a corporate tax and they have an individual income tax. Okay? In Alaska, they don't have corporate taxes. They just have an individual income tax. In Florida, they just have an individual income tax. Okay? In New Hampshire, they just have a sales tax. Montana, a sales tax. Oregon, a sales tax. So the 10 best places to live when it comes to taxes is Wyoming, South Dakota, Alaska, Florida, Nevada, Montana, New Hampshire, Indiana, Utah, and Oregon. Okay? In Indiana and Utah, they have corporate tax and they have individual income tax and they have sales tax, but it's very low. So people can still function. And so one of the issues when it comes to economic soundness is you as a business owner are not going to stick around. Let's talk about between 2011 and 2013, 13,000 households moved out of Connecticut, and their average income was $226,000. That equaled $2.5 billion net. Right now, we're in a $1 billion deficit. So we essentially kicked out people that would buy things in Connecticut, would keep the local businesses going, and so on and so forth, and they're gone. So the challenge is, how do we get them back? Why would they come back to a state that's going to tax them to no end? My girlfriend owns a farm stand on Washington Road. She lives here on Highland View, very lovely neighborhood. She had to relocate to Florida. Her husband's an airplane pilot. They couldn't stand the taxes. So her home is in Florida. She comes back to Connecticut May, June, July, and August. And before you know it, the farm stand is done and she goes back to Florida. So she'll come back next spring and do her little business. She's had her business for almost 30 years, but she couldn't afford the taxes. So what happened in the meantime? Between 2011 and 2013, 18,000 families moved in. And their average income was $71,000 a year. Now, my statistics, I couldn't gather how many people were in the household, but I did call up because I wanted to know how many refugees were coming in from Syria. And to date, we have 90 people on the internet. Well, I called a friend of mine from Catholic Charities, Jamal Akbed. He's an acquaintance, and a friend of mine gave me his name. And actually, he doesn't have any idea. He knows it's over 300. So even when you Google it, you can't really get the figures. Our president at this present moment wants, his goal is 10,000. Well, the question is, are they vetted? Where are they coming from? Are they going to assimilate? I know folks that are coming into the country faster than Bob's your uncle. We're paying for their education, we're paying for the EBT cards, we're paying for their housing. That's our economic fragile state. Did that answer your question?
I'd like to ask you about your views on education.
My favorite subject. And I said this during the debate, and I made it very clear for anyone that heard the debate. They can Google the debate, it's on the internet. The punchline is this: in my little town here, and one of my constituents, hopeful constituents, Billy Benoit, he lives in Stafford, he said, gee, you didn't talk enough about Stafford's school system. And I can't speak for Stafford's school system at this time, but I do know this, that if the state cuts back what they hope to cut back so that they can balance the budget, 10% of the state funding that goes to Stafford will be decreased by $900,000. So that means to me that they get $9 million from the state, because 10% of $9 million would be $900,000, and Summers gets $6 million, which would be $600,000. So if you have school systems that have this kind of a budget crunch where 10% isn't coming into the school system, then we need to think very carefully and thoughtfully about what we're going to do to solve the problem. So in Summers, I'll speak for Summers at this time, our school budget is $22 million. I was one of 2 citizens that showed up at the budget meeting, and the superintendent was lamenting that $217,000 of our $22 million, a drop in the bucket I might add, was going to pay for 29 students that go to magnet schools. Well, when you divide it out, it's about $7,495 per student. Now, anybody who knows anything about magnet schools or CREC, they know that these students are getting an exemplary education. So when you divide 1,420 students, that's the student population in Summers. Last year it was 1,485 students, so our student population went down 60 students. But our budget went up $553,000. That's over $500,000 our budget went up, even though our school population decreased. In our town we have 18 students that are homeschooled, 29 students that are going to the magnet schools. And from what my research has told me, we have between 20 and 30 folks going to private schools in this town. So our magnet school students are getting an exemplary education at their school systems for half the price, because when you divide 1,420 into 22 million, you get about $16,000 per student. That's a problem. 65% of our budget is taking care of the maintenance of buildings and the administrative costs and the teachers' salaries. So this $22 million and this $553,000 increase is not contributing to the child. So what we need to do is we need to have children's parents take ownership of where they want their children to be educated. Now, I am not against public schools. I went to public schools from the 1st grade to the 7th grade in the Boston area. And then from 8th grade to high school, I went to a Catholic school, and I'm very grateful for my education. It was exemplary at that time. The public schools in Boston were also exemplary. Everyone had to learn Latin and French. So today's public school systems are very different from yesterday's public school systems, and that brings me to Common Core. Common Core is going through our educational system like a wildfire, and all Common Core is achieving is teaching children how to take a test. It really is a scheme to rewrite our educational system. Now, one of the things that I'm against is trans-Pacific partnerships. I'm against binding arbitration, and I'm against Common Core. These three entities have one thing in common, and that is control. Let me give you an example. If you go to the Burlington Coat Factory, this particular store says if you return your item within so many days, you get your cash back, or you get your credit card credited, or depending on whether you wrote a check out, you have to wait so many days. Well, they make you sign an agreement, and the agreement says that you'll get your money back dependent on the arbitrator's decision. So this so you sign this receipt, and you're thinking you're getting your money back, but the glitch is you're not getting your money back because, it has to go to an arbitrator. Now, an arbitrator can decide, well, we're not giving you your money back. Well, that's what the Trans-Pacific Partnership's all about. There's an outside globalist group of judges or arbitrators, and they decide your destiny. So it totally takes away our sovereignty as a nation. And the same thing with binding arbitration. Binding arbitration does what's beneficial for unions. So at the end of the day, you have this outside source arbitrating what's best for your town. Well, that's not going to work because they don't live in town. They have no idea what our town's needs are. And they're totally devoid of the repercussions of the decision. So the punchline is you, as the victim of some outside arbitrator, you have no recourse. You can't even take it to the Supreme Court. You have no opportunity for appeal. Same thing with Common Core. Common Core is taking the education of our children away from the Board of Ed and away from the parents. We need, as we the people, to define the words so that we can speak intelligently. For years, I've been teaching the preamble to the Constitution. Last Tuesday, when I was at my class, because we teach 22 weeks out of the year, we teach faith formation. Faith, the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things I cannot see. So in order to first teach faith formation, people have to understand what is faith formation. So I teach our 8th graders the reality that they're in the 8th grade and they have the faith that they're going to graduate from the 8th grade and go to high school. That is their faith. The substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things I cannot see. So every time we get together, it's God and country. So we do our prayers, and then we do the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag, and then we do the preamble to the Constitution. I don't know what made me decide this, but I said, gee, folks, do you know what the word union means? Do you know what the word justice means? Do you know what the word tranquility means? Do you know what the word welfare means? Do you know what the word blessing means? Do you know what the word liberty means? Do you know what posterity means? Do you know what any of this means? The students are looking at me with this deer in a headlight look. And it occurred to me after all these years of me teaching them by rote memory, we the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, gee, do you folks know what these words mean? And they didn't. So the whole class was about virtue. So we're teaching the class virtues, but the preamble of the Constitution cannot be more virtuous. And we tied in the words of the preamble to the Constitution into virtues and the definition of virtues. And this is a very exciting thing. So when you have people that don't understand the nomenclature, but don't understand the words you're speaking, we're in a big situation that's a problem. So our whole class was on defining words. And Common Core, if you all don't know what Common Core is about, Thomas and I were going to be doing a film just on Common Core so that you can be equipped. We the people need to be equipped. Did I answer your question about the economics?
I look forward to that too. I look forward to that.
Okay.
Regional cooperation among towns.
You know, at the debate, I used the example of our cluster church. All Saints and St. Edward's have clustered together. We as a community, there were conversations, how we can save money, how we can keep our building sustained, how we can synergistically work together. So if we do the 11 o'clock mass, you can do the 9 o'clock mass. If you do 4 o'clock mass, then we can do 5 o'clock. If you do this, we can do that. So we can work together so that folks can work with their families within our community of worshiping God. The same thing applies to the four-town fair. That's another opportunity where 4 towns get together. One town is the main town, so this past 4-town fair parade, for example, our first selectman was at the top of the parade, you know, saying hello to everybody and welcoming them into this whole 4-town parade extravaganza and this whole wonderful thing with 4-H and all the wonderful things that the fair provides for our 4 communities. And then next year it will be another town that will be the head honcho, and they'll be the first in the parade. It works beautifully. It's worked for over 100 years. Regional cooperation is a very good thing. One of my opponents was talking about how the Hartford Alliance doesn't work for the communities within the Hartford region because Hartford needs so much, so they get most of the state money. So when it comes to working together as a region, it's a wonderful concept because we as regions can share the expenses, but it has to be we the people who want that kind of cooperation. Does that help you out with my take on that subject? I don't like the idea of the state saying you're going to do this or else.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody likes that.
No. Environment.
The environment is very important to me. I belong to the General Federated Women's Clubs, and Fran Schaefer, a friend of mine, and Colleen Smith, great gals, and they're always planning our hiking around Bigelow and the land trusts and so on and so forth. So I really have an appreciation for the land, especially when it comes to the farmers. Summers is a farming community. And being a farming community, there are a lot of homeowners that would like to have chickens, for example. In the Boston area, there are a lot of people that are celebrating having chickens because chickens, if they're made with all these hormones and chemicals and they're fat and plump, but they're not eating the grass-fed and they're not eating really good organic grain and so on and so forth, they could be very damaging to our children because the children get the hormones, so on and so forth. Well, we have these ordinances in town that make no sense. We're a farming town, and some people get to have a chicken in town and others don't. And some people get to have horses and others don't. And the horse takes up more land than the chicken. So we really need to resolve this on a local level, especially in rural Stafford. Stafford has the most land mass than anywhere in the state of Connecticut. And they get their trees raped from the land. For example, when it comes to summers, we have a prison here. So one of the reasons why we should have a low mill rate is because we house criminals. And so we do the state a very big favor. Well, it's likewise with Stafford. They have these beautiful forests, and the state just comes in and just takes the trees out of the forest, and they give the town of Stafford pennies on the dollar. This has to stop. Stafford should be treated with more respect when it comes to their land. And there's so much more that I could discuss about the environment. And I'm hoping for a next show, Thomas, that we make that happen. Because there's the fisheries, all the bait, the little bait shops, all closed down. Now you have to buy bait at the Extra Mart. And the environmental situation going on in Connecticut is like carbon monoxide. It's killing us, and we can't smell it, and we can't see it. Another issue is the farmers. I have a farm right down the street on Shaker Road. It's been here as long as the Shakers. our town select woman, she collaborated with 22 citizens to shut the farmer's cannon down. The cannon's important because if you have the geese going to your property and taking the seeds, eating the seeds, and then the geese are very clever, they cover up the seeds. So the farmer's saying, where's my crop? How come it's not growing? And then he goes and he sees that the geese stole his seed. A farmer, if they don't get a profit margin of at least 10%, they're in a very dire situation. And with this last summer that we had, the drought, well, the incumbent, I shamed him into signing my petition because I had a petition for all farmers in Connecticut to be protected. And the farming and the agriculture in this town and throughout Connecticut needs to be protected. He didn't want to sign. I said, everyone in the room has signed the petition except for you. Will this hurt my election? Who cares? It's about protecting the farmer, first and foremost. So the 22 citizens got their way for a season, and then the Department of Agriculture at the state level stepped in and gave the Lyman Farm, or Rushmore Farm, their cannon to execute. It's impractical for a farmer to stand out in his land and shoot a gun, so it's an automatic cannon. And we'll talk more about farming as we move along this year. That will be an exciting topic, and the environment. So.
Very much so. Transportation.
Another favorite subject of mine. We, the people in Somers, Connecticut, and Stafford, have been victimized by a intersection that has been responsible for 54 car accidents between 2000 and this present moment. And you saw on the introduction how I became a civic protagonist to see that we get things done. And a corporation wants to come in and build another gas station on this corner. It's only 1.22 acres. It's adjacent to wetlands. It's adjacent to a historic church. It's the center and the heart of our downtown. And we've had 2 pedestrians pass away by attempting to cross the street. And the intersection's just plain old dangerous. And now we're going to have this potential company, like tonight I'm going to be at a conservation meeting to find out what their vote is going to be concerning this entity coming into our town. But transportation and safety is a big problem. Well, the incumbent and our leadership in town didn't go to any of the public hearings. We had 6 public hearings and they weren't anywhere to be found. And I find that we, the people, have to take the bull by the horns and make things happen. So I personally wrote to the Attorney General, to Mr. Harlow, the Department of Transportation, he's the engineer. I wrote to the Department of Consumer Protection, the Department of Environmental Protection, and the Preservation Society in Connecticut. So 6 entities were informed about what's going on in our intersection. So our incumbent is on public safety and on the Transportation Commission. And guess what? He couldn't even voice his opinion at any of these hearings. So after the debate, he came up to me and he says, "Oh, I really want to help you with that." Well, do something. Don't just give me lip service. I can't stand when people say they want to do something, but they don't put any action into their words. We, the people, do not have to be state reps, or we don't have to be selectmen. We don't have to be any of those things. We just have to put out a petition, share what destiny we want our town and our state and our country to go to, and we can make things happen. But wouldn't it be great if we had a voice at these hearings and at these legislative facilities, so that we can have real, strong leadership that truly is listening to the people, not just lip service. I don't have a lot of patience for lip service. So when it comes to transportation, safety is critical. And I believe our present leadership was asleep at the switch.
Health. Let's talk about health.
I love that subject too. I've been in the health, I studied public health at UMass, and I was in the dental field for years, and health is a very critical piece of my identity and the way I live. Not because it's a trend, but health is a critical piece in living a life that's worth living. And there are so many people that don't have good health. They've been born with conditions, like myself. I've been born with a heart murmur. So you call it a congenital heart murmur. That means you were born with it. And so I didn't realize until I went to Colorado that mile-high city affected my health. So fortunately, my husband and I have a beautiful home, and our children are financially sound. They have very good businesses, so they can come back and forth to Connecticut anytime they want, and we can show our hospitality and they can come home. But I don't have the privilege of going to Colorado unless I want to take pharmaceutical drugs, and I'm not signing up for that. So I guess Connecticut is going to have to enjoy my company until I pass away and go to heaven. Now, this incumbent, he has this thing called Behind the VAIL, and I changed it to VEIL. And the reason why I did is because on his first flyer that came in August, he said he proposed and supported a bill that would allow Connecticut residents to have short-term care insurance 300 or less days. And I said to myself, I didn't know that was a need. So it took me a couple of months, but I went to the Legislative Law Library in Hartford, and I got his record, and I got his commissions that he was on. And the truth is, by August, it was not just something he supported and proposed, it was passed. And it became enacted October 2016. And so there is a conflict of interest clause, and it's 7-478. It's a statute, Title 7, Chapter 113, Part 3. And this conflict of interest says very clearly that you cannot directly or indirectly have a future reward or compensation on anything you do as a public official. Even if you're just a volunteer on a board, it's a conflict of interest. And what did our state rep do? He proposed, supported, and passed a bill that would benefit his livelihood. He sells insurance at an insurance company in Stafford. And I find that appalling. You know, and you know what's even more appalling? It's not illegal. That conflict of interest clause is really just for towns.
Yeah, it's not illegal. Absolutely.
It's not illegal for him and all the other legislators to pass bills to benefit their own livelihood.
Mm-hmm.
That makes me sick.
Me too. On that note, we're running close on time right now in accordance with the allowed amount of time for the television station. So maybe we'll wrap it up now. And I just want to say that I pray for your election win coming up November 8th. It was a real pleasure to hear you talk about these things. Thank you so much, Linda Louise LaCasse. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And do you want me to say anything in closing?
What's that?
May I say something in closing?
You certainly can.
You know, Yogi Berra said, it ain't over until it's over. And I know that our president used that slogan, and I just love it. And I just want to remind everybody that this is a marathon, not a sprint. And there's only one reason why I'm not going to lose. It's because I'm not going to quit. No matter what, as this 2016 unfolds, whether you vote for me or not this election cycle, I'll give you another chance the next election cycle, and the next election cycle, and the one after that, because I'm not going to quit. and between Thomas and I using public access TV and using YouTube, I am going to make sure that we the people understand everything that comes out of that LOB. The LOB is the Legislative Office Building. And when you press the lever or you color in the little black spot there, you're going to know why you're voting for Linda Louise. And may the Lord bless you and keep you. May His face shine upon you and give you peace. Because at the end of the day, if we don't have peace,